Morning, folks. Councilman Rasmussen here, coming to you with my update from our first 2025 Smyrna Town Council meeting, January 21st. It was a Tuesday this month because Martin Luther King Day was on Monday. So lots of stuff. We did not have our first January meeting because of the snowstorm that happened earlier this year. There weren't a ton of agenda items. We were able to reschedule everything. So rather than trying to reschedule the meeting and have two of them back to back in 2 weeks, we opted to just, cancel that first meeting and add the additional items onto the agenda. It pushed back a couple of things, but nothing that was super critical. So it's kind of a smart decision to make rather than try and juggle the issues with the snowstorm. And if you're like me, you had your kids home for an extra couple of days, which was just wonderful. And happily they are back in school. I hope everybody is staying warm out there. Obviously it is frigid. If you're outside and having to do any work, I hope that you're, got all of the right personal protective equipment and things like that. I know even just spending half an hour outside working yesterday, my toes were very chilly. So, just jumping into updates, major things. So obviously the town tidbits is a way to find a lot of this stuff in the town website to list all of the events. Just one thing to note, Christmas tree collection, if you still have your Christmas tree, does continue on till Friday the 31st. So if you still got a Christmas tree, you still have time to put it out on the curb and have our guys come along and pick it up. There is no yard waste collection going on aside from Christmas trees right now. The yard waste collection will start back up again in the spring. I have seen some bins sitting out on the street with sticks and things in it. Those will not be picked up by our town staff. They're not doing yard waste collection right now. So if you've got a blue bin and it's sitting out in front of your house and you're hoping that they're going to show up, they're not. Bring it back to the curb or back by your house, and they'll come and get it when we start up yard waste collection again later on in the spring. Just a general regular updates, not a ton of stuff. Obviously the holidays is a really, really busy time of year, so there's less stuff going on in January, February, and March. Also, it's freezing cold. So couple of things to note on the update side. So I've mentioned before, we get our report from the town manager about the goings-on the town, the progress on a number of different things. I thought I'd just point out a couple of items that are on this because I think that they're important. One, and I hope that a lot of people have seen this, the town has been rolling out our new update system, our alert system. So we had a water main break, we had a sewer break, and those updates are going out, and they're going out via text messages, they're going out via emails, they're going out via automated phone calls, and they're going out onto the town's social media. The goal here is obviously to reach a lot more people, and the town manager and the IT department have put a lot of work into trying to get this up and running. The more people that are on it, the more people that are signed up, hopefully the fewer questions and complaints and things that we get, because there's just more information flowing out to people faster. So I know that I'm already getting all of these. We were in part of the beta testing to make sure that the system works. But you are able to sign up for this if you make sure your phone number and your address and your email are accurate with the town. That is a great way to make sure that you're added to the list and you're able to get this. You can sign up on the town website, put in your information to make sure that the town has it, and you'll get added to this to get all of those updates. That's a big thing. It's awesome to see it start rolling out. I think it's really going to help people to just better understand what's going on in the town, right? If you know that there's a water main break on South Street, then you know to avoid South Street if you're driving through town, things like that. So that's a big one. One of the other ones, and this comes from most of the people, especially if you live in downtown, we all got letters required by the federal government, by the EPA, about lead pipes. And depending on where you live and how old your house was, you may have gotten a different version of a letter. There were lots and lots and lots of thousands of the letters went out throughout the course of the town. Just to let you know, we had 72 people have reached back out to the town so far with inquiries about theirs, wanting to get checks and make sure. 65 of them requested that we do a lead test on their house, and every single one of those have come back without any lead levels being detected or unsafe lead levels being detected. So Overall, our system is performing very, very well. Most of the updates have been done. It doesn't mean that it's not possible that there is somebody who might still have lead service line that hasn't reached out. But so far, the response from the community, the people who've been asked for us to do some assessment, everybody has come out back without any sort of lead in their system, which is great. That's what we want to hear, because it certainly can be expensive to replace those service lines to homes if there are lead contamination. If you have that letter and you haven't called yet, you can still call the town, reach out to them, ask to be tested, or go out and get one of the lead tests and do it yourself if you feel like you need to. But so far, of the 65 that we've been asked to conduct, every single one of them has come back safe, which is great. So those were just a couple of the little things, the notification system and that I thought were important pieces. I will just give you a quick little update on town budget stuff. It's not part of the overall conversation, but we do receive the town basically statements of revenue and expenditures at these meetings. So we have pretty much finished out 2024 at this point. There are still some outstanding things. There are outstanding taxes that haven't been collected. There are outstanding water and sewer bills that haven't been collected. But for the most part, all of the revenue is in, and most, if not all, of the bills have been paid. So it takes usually a couple of months to make sure that everything gets figured out at the end of the year before we have final end of the year numbers. But we're very, very close at this point. So a couple of things to note. We have collected so far about 93.3% of the total taxes due to the town. We typically collect about 97% of the total taxes due to the town. So we're performing a little bit lower than that. That's a total of about $676,000 that we still have to go out and collect. This does happen every year. There are collections that need to be done. Unpaid taxes need to get billed. There are fines and fees and things. So that number will just creep up slower and slower to get us up to the point where we typically figure is what we're expecting. The overall health of the budget from 2024 is pretty much where we expected it to be, which is that we have right now, between all of the different funds, just about enough money to make the contributions that we need to do into our capital reserve account. That's supposed to be $1.95 million. Right now, we've got about $1.441 million in cash collected, and then as the additional monies get collected over the course of the next couple of months, that should inch its way back up towards that amount where we're supposed to be, which would going to be close to $2 million. So we're on track for where we want to be for the 2025 budget. We are, budgeting those numbers as conservatively as we can, but it shows we tracked very well in 2024 where we thought we would be. 2025 budget is even better because we have better estimates for revenue and expenses than we had, and I think it's going to be a lot even cleaner process in 2025. But overall, pretty happy with where the 2024 budget year is finishing out. There were people who were saying we were going to have this crazy large surplus at the end of the year. Sort of having watched these numbers, I know that wasn't going to be true, that by the time we make our final contributions to our capital reserve accounts, we're pretty much going to be a zero-based budget or a flat budget like we had intended it to be. And that's what we're looking like for 2025 as well. So that's real quick. There's obviously pages and pages and pages of spreadsheets that you can look through at each one of the different funds, but the high level is that we're tracking pretty close to where we want to be. The 2023 audit is still ongoing. That is going to probably be another couple of months, and then we start right into 2024. We typically start the 2024 audit or the previous year's audit May, June. So that's where hopefully 2023 is done and we're starting into the 2024 audit on time this year, versus where we've been in past years, which is obviously very late. We're at least a year behind on the 2023 audit. So more to come on all of that as things fit out. As far as the agenda from last night's meeting, so we actually started off with a Del Dot workshop. This was originated because of obviously issues here that the town has raised and legislators have raised around one of the safety issues on one of the Del Dot roads and the intersection of US 13, Corey Lane, Dominic Lane, Sweet Corn Boulevard. This is the intersection where on 13, where the crossover is to get to the Smyrna Diner, the Waffle House, the Firestone, the new Planet Fitness on that side, and on the other side it pulls in right there by the Burger King and those shops on the south, or I guess it's the west side of the road. This is a problem intersection. There are lots of accidents there. Unfortunately, last year we had 2 fatal accidents there, both motorcycles. That is obviously not something that we want to see. And I think generally everyone kind of knows that this is an unsafe intersection. In fact, I will tell you that I almost always avoid that intersection because I know it's unsafe. I go down to the light at the Wawa and make the turn there because I don't want to end up in a situation where you're trying to cross over and somebody doesn't know how to read the lines, somebody doesn't know where they're supposed to be. So this has been raised for a little while. Del Dot last year conducted a number of different traffic studies out in that area in order to look at how the traffic flow was going, pulled all of the crash data, tried to analyze that as best as we could to come up with some potential proposals for what could be done to help that intersection, make that intersection safer. So they presented a lot of data last night and presented their recommendations. They have 3 different alternatives that were presented at the workshop. And I'll just sort of go over them real quick for you. So one alternative was to put in a signal there, 4-way stop, basically make it another 4-way stop. They have a number of different requirements that need to be met in order for a signal to be an appropriate use in one of those places. And this intersection doesn't meet enough of those requirements for this to be considered. But they ran the options anyway just to sort of see what would happen. It's actually estimated from their research that it would actually have a net increase in the total number of crashes to put a light at that intersection, because it would require much more accelerating and stopping. You would have a lot more crashes that potentially could happen. Now, that's just crashes. It doesn't necessarily mean fatalities. Maybe cars would be moving slower and you'd have a lot more fender benders, but that wasn't a great option from their opinion. There were 2 options that actually showed that they would have a reduction in the total number of crashes. One was to put what they call an unsignalized R-cut. Sort of tough to explain, but you can imagine what it basically means is you can only turn right. That there would be almost no crossing over between. So if you're heading north, you could turn right into the Firestone, Smyrna Diner, Planet Fitness thing, and you could turn right coming out of it, but you could not cross over 13 and try and go south on 13 like you currently can. The southbound lanes, the proposal is a little bit different, that they would still allow the turn in from southbound to the Smyrna Diner, what is called Corey Lane. Because there is a lot of traffic that moves that way, it tends to be people who live in Smyrna rather than people traveling through. And if you reduce all of the other traffic in there, they expect that you would still see about a 34% reduction in crashes at that intersection. The last proposed option was just to totally shut down the median entirely. And all traffic has to either make right turns or go up and make U-turns and come back down. This one showed the best reduction in potential crashes at that intersection, a reduction of about 45%, though it would show additional accidents at the other intersections because you'd have a lot more people making U-turns, and it does create some additional issues with truck traffic and buses and larger vehicles because there's a lot more U-turns happening. So it shows lower traffic potential accidents at the crossover where we're talking about, but a slightly higher increase in those other intersections. Ultimately, their recommendation, I think the best path forward is the unsignalized R-cut, which is that pretty much everybody can only turn right going in and out of the either Corey Lane or Sweet Corn Lane. And if you need to, if you come out of there and you need to be going south on 13, then you've got to go up and make a U-turn at the Lipsick Road interchange or some other interchange further north. So that was their recommendation. This is something that can be done relatively quickly. It's mostly going to be done with signage, pavement marking, some those like little like things that stick up on sticks that are like a little bit floppy. You can technically run them over. It's not going to kill you. We're not talking Jersey barriers and stuff like that going up, but relatively low cost way to try and address this. That was what was proposed to the town as the best potential option. The implementation timeline for something like this is actually relatively quick. We're looking at before peak traffic season comes in late spring and summer. And the town council added this to the agenda, the published agenda, to recommend that DelDOT and the town move forward with this. So our town staff will work with DelDOT to try and get whatever they need to. There's going to be a lot of signage out there. There'll be the whole new traffic pattern coming soon and new traffic pattern signs. There'll be communication to all of the property owners and the neighboring businesses. They'll put it out on the websites, put it out on social media and all that. People will still miss it. People will still complain. It is what it is. But in the end, if it sees a 34% reduction in overall crashes, and if it takes those fatalities away, I think we've done a great service to improving the safety of the roadway here in Smyrna. This is, certainly one of the highest, or the largest area in town where we have these type of accidents. So it was a really nice presentation from DelDOT, a nice discussion about what it would look like, and ultimately you will see changes coming on 13 to address that interchange later on this spring. So that's how we started off the council meeting. As far as normal agenda items, we had 3 third readings for ordinances, these old business items. I've mentioned them all multiple times because we've already read them twice. One was to extend the property tax deduction to people with who are totally disabled, and increase the limits on the amount that you can make a little bit this year in order to qualify for the property tax exemption if you're over the age of 65. That one received its third reading and final approval. We had one that requires rental licenses and inspections for properties even if you are renting to somebody who is your family member, because unfortunately people will abuse that system and provide substandard and non-compliant housing to even family members. So that got its third reading and will go into effect. And lastly, the clarification around the prohibition about farm animals, chickens and ducks, is really what we're talking about here, in town limits. So at the third reading, April 1st is when enforcement for this is going to happen. If you've got chickens and you've got ducks or whatever it is that you've got in town that is a farm animal, you need to get rid of it by April 1st. So sort of on notice. If you got chickens and they're running around on Main Street, maybe sooner than that. We had another old business item, which was just the official appointment of 4 members to the Police Accountability Board. This is what our Public Safety Committee, there was legislation that required the creation of these public or police accountability boards. There were 4 members who were put forward as this, and we had a final vote to approve them. Those members are Reverend Rainier Robinson, Justin Capps, Corrine Upshur, and Tori James. They represent a member of the clergy, a citizen that's been affected by the criminal justice system, a community member, and the chief of police. So we have those 4 members. We can add more members to it should we choose to, but this gets us in compliance with the state law requiring these police accountability boards. Then on to new business. So the old business was stuff that we've all sort of mentioned before. The new business, so we had the first reading of Ordinance 1-25, which is to make an update to the economic development incentives for fire protection impact fees and ambulance service impact fees. I've mentioned this a few times because we've been discussing this for a while at council. The town, the history here, the town last year had a worked with the fire and ambulance services to have a impact fee study conducted to see what our impact fees should be for fire and ambulance services here in town. That study came back to us last summer, and we ultimately voted to implement the recommended levels at an 80% level. You could go all the way up to 100%, like what's the maximum you could legally or defensibly and legally charge. We chose to start off at 80% of that level. The one sticky point in all of this was with the IORP, or the industrial parks. That in order to be competitive in trying to attract people to build in those industrial parks, which ultimately brings jobs to town, our impact fees were many times above what was being charged in other municipalities. And so in order to be competitive, we looked at what the total impact would be overall for the amount of money collected, how it compared to other areas, the costs associated with this. Jeremy Rothwell, the director of planning for the town, put a lot of information together multiple times for this. Ultimately, what we opted to do was to do the same thing that we do for all the other town impact fees. So police, parks, municipal, water, sewer, which is offer up to a 50% abatement depending on how much money you spend. To get 50% off of those, you got to spend like $5 million. Now, if you're building a 100,000 square foot warehouse, that's probably not a hard number to hit. So what the code ordinance or the ordinance does is basically just add fire and ambulance impact fees to the list of fees that we will offer that abatement for, based on how much money somebody spends. We're only talking about the industrial park areas. This doesn't apply to the highway commercial. It doesn't apply to any residential areas, the downtown commercial area. We're really just talking about, really at this point, the KRM, the Duck Creek Business Park, since that's the only area in town that really hasn't been built out yet. This is the first reading of that ordinance. It will come back to us 2 more times before it ultimately goes into effect. We had the first reading of an ordinance to actually define the definition of a sidewalk. So the reason why this came up is that the difference between, or some people basically assume that their driveway extends over the sidewalk, and you have people parking in their driveway that blocks the sidewalk and restricts access to it. So the town needed to update and clarify the definition of what a sidewalk is, so that we can let people know if you're parking your car and you're blocking the sidewalk, just because that sidewalk is part of your driveway doesn't mean that it is not a sidewalk that needs to be open and maintained for public access. So again, this is all, bad actors. Half the time we see stuff in town council, it's because somebody does something that you kind of just know you're not supposed to do, but they don't care, and it creates a problem, and the neighbors complain, and eventually we end up with an ordinance. So that's what we got here. This was the first reading of that. Ordinance number 2-25. We will see it 2 more times before it goes into effect. We had the appointment of an audit review committee. So the audit review committee is every 3 years we go out to get a new auditing firm. So we need to do that. We'll put out an RFP for an auditing firm. Every year we conduct an audit of the town finances. We're a little bit behind on it, like I said, but it's part of our fiducial responsibility to conduct and publish an audit. The team that does that is external to the town. It's not our accountants, though our team works with them very, very closely to give them all the data that they need. So we will be putting out an RFP, soliciting proposals from auditing firms, and we have a review committee, professional people with experience running audits that will review those and ultimately make a recommendation to town council of which proposal to accept and who to work with. Typically, we're talking about 3 years is where we generally are looking for to sign a contract to do 3 years of our audits. That way, the firm has time to get used to our books and ultimately help to highlight and identify things with places where we can improve. It's a lot of what you see. People think audit and they think it's all about the finance numbers. That's a big piece of it, but there's also a ton of policies and procedures and practices and things like that that get highlighted in an audit in ways that we can change our behavior and change our actions. So You'll be seeing that. We'll be seeing that RFP process and ultimately that approval later on in the spring. The senior tax exemption for 2025. I already mentioned that we made some updates to this through the third reading of one of the ordinances. So now we have to every year approve that we will allow that senior tax exemption. So this is something that is, the code says we can do it, and then every year we have to say we will do it. So this is us saying we will do it with the updated finance amounts and the inclusion of people that are on permanent disability. So the form will probably change a little bit this year. The numbers will change, as well as there'll either be an additional form or the same form adjusted to include those folks with permanent disabilities. But the council commits to moving forward and offering that tax exemption. The tax exemption is $30,000 off of your assessed value of your house, which is roughly about a 30% reduction in the home value for a median home in town. You still have to pay taxes. You don't get it off. You just get your taxes reduced. And then the last thing was the solicitation for election board members. So we did set the election for this year. It will be April 29th. Voting will be at Town Hall from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., the normal hours that we typically do. So April 29th, Town Hall, make sure you put that on your schedule so you can come out and vote. And then we have to appoint election board members. So we're soliciting people who want to serve on the municipal election board. We have members who are already there who will likely want to continue. So you will see an official action coming back when we have an official election board that we're going to appoint for this year's election. So that was a lot. Though most of these items moved through pretty quickly. The whole thing, was maybe an hour-long meeting. The workshop was an hour before, but the total meeting. So while there's a lot of stuff, a lot of these were votes that were things that are relatively straightforward and people understand and get, and we move forward on them pretty quickly. So not a ton of back and forth discussion items from the agenda last night. But that was it. That was our first meeting of the year. Our next council meeting is going to be February 3rd. We're back to our regular scheduled council meetings on February 3rd, but then I believe February 17th is President's Day, and so we'll probably have a change to that as well. Let me check that. Yeah, so the second meeting in February will probably be pushed back a day as well, so that'll end up being on the 18th. But our next meeting is scheduled for February 3rd, normal time at Town Council. So if you want to come out and join us, please do. That's about all I've got. Again, make sure you're on the Town Tidbits and make sure you update your email address and your phone number with the town so that you can get on our new update system. There'll be an app and things that you can download so you can add all of that information. But so far, my experience with the system has been great. It's wonderful to get the updates via email, via text. I'm getting them every way. I'll probably eventually, weed out one of those different ways. But it is a nice service that the town manager and the finance or the IT department are rolling out. The more people we have on it, the better. Really, we cannot communicate enough, is my opinion. So make sure you sign up for those things. Again, hope everybody stays warm out there. It's obviously very cold for the next day or so. Take care and let me know if there's any way I can help, as always. Bye.